We are here. It is week 17. It is fantasy championship week, and we have the man that put Amari Cooper on the cover of his article last week, leading to that massive explosion and hopefully winning you all a lot of money. We are the Football Guys DFS show. We have all your cash and GPP plays for this upcoming slate, the main slate in week 17. And I've got Devin Knotts here, and it's going to be the two of us tonight. And Devin, welcome in. How are you doing tonight? And are you ready to win some people some more money?
It's hard to follow up after the Amari Cooper one. The Browns have been very good to me, and Joe Flacco props in particular. So a lot of people were down on him. I was one of the few that said like he's the best quarterback that they've had in 20 years, jokingly, but like it's half serious. I'm good, man. It's week 17. Let's have some fun. No show next week, so this could be it. We'll see. It's gonna depend on if people can hit a like goal that we're gonna announce here shortly. But yeah, I'm ready to go. Phil's out sick, conveniently. Doesn't want to do the last show with us, I guess. But no, hopefully him and his family get better soon. So
yeah, well, and he's yeah, I mean, you've got a little bit of a rivalry here tonight between you being a Browns fan and Phil being a Jets fan. So
that's probably why he didn't show up.
You know, I mean, the way the season has gone, I can't say that I blame him so much. But yeah, Phil, get better soon, and we're definitely going to miss you. We're going to lead it off. We've got our games of the week, and Devin, what games are you targeting this week on this slate?
So I'm just going to announce it so that people who listen to like 10 minutes of the show before we get into games, 100 likes gets you a divisional game. 100 likes, we will do a divisional show. Sorry. So hit the like button, do the subscribe, do the bell, or whatever the YouTube influencers tell you to do. You guys have heard it 100 times. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. 100 likes. Hit the thumbs up. That's all you have to do. The show's free. We've been doing it forever. I don't ask for a lot. Give us 100 likes. Okay. So games. I think the obvious one is San Francisco, Washington. Look, Brock Purdy, some people might be scared off of him. If they are, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, it's these games happen. Like he was injured, didn't play well, facing a good defense. This week he's facing an awful defense, maybe the worst defense in football. So I think everyone in the 49ers game is certainly intriguing. Philadelphia is going up against Arizona, which there's some interesting players there. We could talk about running backs, and DeAndre Swift could be interesting as well as the passing game there. Miami-Baltimore is interesting. I don't know what to think about it just because, we talked a little bit about how that game last week with Dallas was going to be a little disappointing, and it ended up being that way. But the team that I'm really liking this week, and I don't know how popular they're going to be, is Kansas City. Jeff, you're an Ohio guy. You're like 2 hours from Cincinnati. This Bengals defense is atrocious. Terrible. I mean, just abysmal. And Jake Browning's been like good enough. So I think the over under 44 is certainly something that you could look at that game being 35-31. No problem. Like it wouldn't shock me at all.
Yeah, but with Isaiah Pacheco potentially being out, take out another weapon there, and Patrick Mahomes has struggled badly. And so while they have been absolutely terrible for the Bengals defense, we saw the explosion last week from George Pickens. They've kind of done a pretty good job in the past against Patrick Mahomes. So that'll be an interesting. I do expect some points to be scored there, especially if we're getting Jamar Chase back, and that's a situation to monitor. A couple other ones that I'm looking at, the New Orleans and Tampa game. I think that's got potential. We saw what the Rams were able to do against New Orleans last week, and we know what can happen against the Tampa Bay defense. So that is one that I like the pieces in that game. And then, I don't know, maybe the Jacksonville side, maybe against Carolina. Carolina's defense has played a lot better of late, and that's not a high target one for me. But we can move into our cash game plays and set it up on the quarterback. Who is going to be your cash game quarterback this week?
Yeah, let me start out by saying who it's not going to be. I think a lot of people are going to look at Will Levis this week, facing the Houston defense. And to me, it's point chasing. quite a bit as far as people are going to look at the. Give me a second. People are going to look at the Flacco thing and they're going to look at, hey, oh my God, the Browns scored as many points as they did. And Amari Cooper, had as great of a game as he did, but I don't look at it that way. I think that Will Levis isn't really a difference maker, if he even plays. But cash game, I'm gonna look. I think it's Brock Purdy. I think it's just paying for $7,000. $7,000 isn't all that. I mean, it's an expensive price for sure, but it's not necessarily prohibitive. If you wanted to go cheap, there's cheap options on this slate. Tyrod Taylor, 4,600. I mean, against the Rams defense hasn't been all that great recently. If I look at, they allowed 319 yards and 3 touchdowns to Derek Carr, 316 and 3 touchdowns to Lamar Jackson. And then 230 yards and 3 touchdowns to the combination of Jacoby Brissett and Sam Howell. So I think it's either Purdy or Tyrod. Look, Tommy DeVito was fine. Not great, but I think Tyrod's a better quarterback, and he's at least capable of moving the ball in this offense. Other guys that you could look at, if you wanted to take a look at Derek Carr, but Derek Carr is interesting because he's a GPP play. Like I rate in our passing matchups. I was writing this morning. He has, I believe, 6. Let me pull up the exact stat. Derek Carr has 6 games with 300 yards or more, 5 games with fewer than 200 yards, and only 3 games with 200 to 239 yards. So he has not thrown between 240 and 300 yards this season.
Yeah.
He's either very good or atrocious, and that scares me a little bit. So his floor might be a little bit too low.
Baker Mayfield at 6,100. I know that we had to do it in honor of Phil, but I don't know if he's cash game viable, but he has played excellent football lately. And the other one would be Matthew Stafford at 6,600, eyeing him a little bit. They're coming east to face the Giants, so that makes you a little bit nervous because the Giants had pass defense has been a little bit better of late, but I think that they're in that range. But again, if you're going to go 6,600 on Stafford, just step up to Brock Purdy at 7,000. I think it's the way to go there. We can move on to running backs and cash game running back plays. You kind of led it a little bit early with DeAndre Swift in Philadelphia. Who are you really looking for the cash game running back plays?
Yeah, it's tricky because obviously you want to play Christian McCaffrey. The price is awful, 9,600. But I mean, look, there's not. If we look at just running backs in general this week, to me, I want to either play Christian McCaffrey or Kyren Williams, and it's something you're probably going to debate all week because there's a $1,300 difference between the two. Kyren Williams has been awesome, but if you go Tyrod Taylor, I think I like it's hard to say because Kyren has been so good, but the floor of McCaffrey a little bit more. Do we really think San Francisco is going to come out and have 2 of these awful games in a row? I don't think so. I think it's a rebound week for them. Kyren, look, what does he have? I mean, 100 yards in 3 straight games, something like that.
Yeah.
Maybe more than that, but I don't know. I think at that price, McCaffrey has 3 touchdown upside. I'm not sure Kyren Williams has 3 touchdown upside with all of the other options in that offense. The 49ers could be playing the narrative that, hey, we're trying to get an MVP for Christian McCaffrey. Brock Purdy's been open about he's our MVP, even when Brock Purdy was the favorite. So would it surprise me if they came out and just gave McCaffrey the ball 25 times against this defense and they scored 2 or 3 touchdowns? No, it wouldn't. And at 9,600, I think he's a really good value this week. You mentioned Isaiah Pacheco's out, so Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I think, is a he's like the lone guy standing because Jerick McKinnon is on IR, and that I want to target. I want to target the Kansas City defense, and I know that the Cincinnati defense. I know Kansas City's been bad, but this is a Cincinnati defense that allowed 132 yards to Ty Chandler, and everyone freaked out about how great he looked, and then he looked awful last week. I mean, and then Najee Harris and Jalen Warren had over 130 yards rushing and passing over the last week. So I think Clyde Edwards-Helaire is certainly interesting, certainly a cash game viable. Other guys, it's hard, man. I mean, people are going to look at Ezekiel Elliott. I'm not going that route. Rachaad White has been awesome. I mean, and I've said awesome way too many times this show, but Rachaad White's been great. I think he's certainly cash viable against New Orleans. And then the last guy that I don't know what to do with, the price is it's one of the more favorable prices we've seen all year, but Jonathan Taylor at 73 against the Raiders. The Raiders, I don't know if they've. I mean, their run defense has been pretty good, but Jonathan Taylor could be a game changer this week. So he would be a guy. And then if you wanted to go cheap, Devin Singletary against Tennessee. Tennessee's run defense isn't what it used to be, and it's not. I mean, it's not. Doesn't strike fear in me as much as it used to. I mean, Devin Singletary 2 weeks ago had 170 yards against this Tennessee defense. So at his price, could he get 100 yards again? I'm not expecting 170, but at 100, yeah, sure.
Watch the practice reports out of Seattle are interesting because it seems like Ken Walker and both now DK Metcalf have injuries and they're not practicing. So Zach Charbonnet is sitting at 4,600. And that is quite a price on Zach Charbonnet, given the way that we've seen Seattle use him as really a bell cow back when given opportunity with Walker out of the lineup. So if Walker does scratch, I mean, that's when I think it's hard to ignore down there. But you're kind of dealing with that same price level with Clyde Edwards-Helaire at 5,300, like that matchup, like that offense, even more than the Zach Charbonnet. That $700 can make a little bit of a difference throughout your lineup. I mean, it might be the difference between a Brock Purdy and a Baker Mayfield, but at the same time, I think you want that attachment against the Cincinnati defense. But I think you're exactly right on targeting those top backs. And I think you make a good point on Jonathan Taylor because it definitely are due for him to have one of those big games. We just haven't seen it all year long. So you'd like to think it's there. The Raiders have been a very opportunistic defense, but I don't know yardage wise and scoring wise if they're really that good. But they've certainly created turnovers and scored off those opportunities the last couple of weeks. We can move to wide receivers now. How are you building out your cash game lineup at wide receiver?
Yeah, I think it's. Let's just start. I mean, DeAndre Hopkins is going to be the guy that I think a lot of people are going to look at. And it goes back to, DeAndre Hopkins against Houston, what was it, 2 weeks ago? And he didn't have that great of a game. It must have been 3 weeks ago. He had a great game. But Houston allowed 265 yards and 2 touchdowns to Amari Cooper last week. And then Garrett Wilson also had over 100 3 weeks ago. So Hopkins at 6,000, I think is a fair price. I don't think he's a guy that you have to slide in automatically. I would probably rather, I mean, look, let's just talk roster construction here for a second. If we're going Clyde Edwards-Helaire, if we're going Christian McCaffrey, if we're going cheap at quarterback with a Tyrod Taylor, you have money to burn. And, guys like Chris Olave at 6,800 against Tampa Bay, I think, is in a really good spot. He's been sort of like the lone guy that they've had. Alvin Kamara really hasn't been all that great. 3.8 yards per carry compared to a career average of 4.5. So that's concerning. Devontae Adams, I think, is interesting. Probably won't go there, though, at 74, just because the price is a little too high. And who knows with Aiden O'Connell. So I probably won't go in that direction, but I know that a number of people will. And then what do we do with George Pickens? Like 5,300. The matchup is not horrible against Seattle. Seattle's been up and down against the pass this season. It seems like point chasing. I would not recommend it in a GPP, but what are your thoughts there?
I think it's point chasing, to be honest with you. I do think they're going to go back to Mason Rudolph, but we just talked about how terrible that Bengals defense is. And when you really look at it, it wasn't a big volume day. He just broke 2 long touchdowns. And I think anytime you have that situation, anytime I see somebody catch 4 passes and kind of go that way, it makes me nervous on kind of doubling down, especially in a cash game situation. I think you can pivot. If DK Metcalf, he picked up, the report I just read was that he picked up a back injury and it was a new injury that he just missed practice today. Jackson Smith and Jigba at 4,800, I think, has really started to step up and be kind of one of those keys in their offense. And so with DK Metcalf out of the lineup, you're playing the other side, and I feel better about having Geno Smith as my quarterback than trusting Mason Rudolph to do it again 2 weeks in a row. So you're kind
It's
of
not Christmas anymore, so Rudolph's over.
Yeah, exactly. It's like every backup quarterback this year gets one game, and Mason Rudolph used his right away, and now we're there. So, wheels fall off quickly. I think that other ones I'm looking at, Puka Nacua at 7,900. They're going up against the Giants, and they're kind of record chasing a little bit there. He's got a chance to break the rookie record for receiving yards, and I do think that Cooper Kupp, it's kind of low key. I don't know that it's been on the injury report, but he got dinged in that Saints game, and he was a different player. Kind of after that hit, he got hit kind of on his elbow, and he just played differently the rest of that game. So Puka Nacua, the way he stepped up last week and him chasing the record, I like him at 7,900. And then Jamar Chase, if he's going to be back at 7,600, you're playing Clyde Edwards-Helaire. If you're dabbling around with the Chiefs, I mean, that's a potential bring back situation there. Kind of, Jake Browning's looked capable enough of getting the ball to his playmakers. The Chiefs or the Bengals playing for that last playoff spot, and certainly are going to go all in for that. So I like Chase at 7,600. That feels like a rare, pretty low price for Jamar Chase.
If Chase, well, I think the issue with Chase is his floor has been sort of all over the place. But
yeah,
if Chase doesn't play, I think T. Higgins becomes like a lock and load type scenario at 6,500. The other guy that I didn't mention, I think is always cash game viable. At least he's been in the last several weeks. Is Rashee Rice. Again, I just want to target players against this Bengals defense. 6,900 is a very fair price. Rice doesn't have the upside. He doesn't have that like 140 yard and 2 touchdown upside, but he's getting like 80 yards a game and scoring every now and then. So I think he's in a PPR setting, he's more than fine. And then the last one I'll throw out there is Brandon Ayuk at 7K. Like, we have money to burn. Benjamin St-Juste is allowing the most yards to opposing wide receivers this season. And if you don't want to go McCaffrey, or you just say, hey, the 49ers are going to put up 28, 35 points, and I'm going to take both those guys, I wouldn't blame you. So I think, like, I'm trying to target offenses this late in the season. I'm trying to target Kansas City. I'm trying to target New Orleans. I'm trying to target San Francisco. And I'm trying to target, Tampa's interesting. I don't like Mike Evans just because of the history against New Orleans. But maybe it's
out. So
is he? Okay.
Yeah.
I missed that one. So that should change things. Maybe he's even more motivated based on his struggles against his team. Maybe not. And then Terry McLaurin, I think, is in an interesting run back spot against San Francisco. 5,500 is a pretty fair price. San Francisco hasn't been, they've been good, but like, they haven't been dominant in a couple weeks. So we've seen wide receivers be able to get yardage against them.
Yeah, I do like that. It does seem like McLaurin has a little bit of a better rapport with Jacoby Brissett at quarterback than maybe was going on with Sam Howell. We've seen some big performances, especially 2 weeks ago. So you like that call out. I think that's kind of, I mentioned Jackson Smith and Jigba. That's kind of where I'm at on wide receivers. Tight ends. So I've got one name that I'm kind of circling and looking at tight end. Isaiah Likely at 4,600. Where are you going at tight end?
right now I'm going with Gerald Everett at 3,500. Like the Chargers are, I mean, Keenan Allen is, if he hasn't been ruled out already, I don't see him playing. But, we look at what the Chargers did against the Bills, and they struggled to move the ball. But, if I look at Gerald Everett, he had 7 catches for 42 yards. The matchup theoretically should be a little bit easier this week, especially with the Broncos cutting, who'd they cut? Kareem Jackson. So he's back in Houston now. Safeties have been an issue for this Broncos defense all season, given that Jackson has been suspended many times. So I think he's a guy that I'm looking at. If you wanted to spend up, I think Evan Ingram's fine. I don't love him, but I think he's fine.
Yeah, it's Travis Kelce at 7,000. That feels like legacy pricing. I mean, you like the matchup against the Bengals, but to have that much of a spread to Travis Kelce at 7,000 versus Trey McBride at 5,900, Evan Ingram at 5,700. I mean, I'm going those guys most every day, but I say that now, and maybe that's a patented J Bell reverse jinx, and Travis Kelce is going to go out and give us 3 touchdown performance. We're going to wait and see on that one, but make sure to head to footballguys.com/plans to become a Hall of Fame subscriber. Hall of Fame subscribers get access to all DFS content for less than $20 monthly or $95 annually. Grab on for a monthly subscription for the NFL playoffs. We'll try to win you that money back and cover that membership, and we just can go for a ride and continue to give you that content throughout the NFL playoffs. But that allows us to move into GPP plays. And how are you structuring quarterbacks in your GPP games?
Yeah, GPPs are completely different. So, like, I wouldn't play Brock Purdy in a GPP setting. Yeah, I mean, they should put up a lot of points, like I talked about, but why? I mean, what's the difference between like a Jalen Hurts' upside or Brock Purdy? So Brock Purdy's going to be the most expensive guy or highest rostered quarterback this week, probably in the 15% range, and it just seems like it's too high. I think I'm either going all the way up or I'm going down, and I'm going down with Tyrod Taylor again. I think that against this Rams defense, this game could be a sneaky shootout. So I think you could even stack him with like a Puka Nacua on the other side as a run back. Jalen Hurts, I think, is in a tremendous spot against Arizona. We saw Justin Fields dominate. The only question is whether Arizona can do enough to keep the game close. Patrick Mahomes, I mean, right now he's trending to be about 3% rostered, which is crazy. Justin Fields is trending to be about 3% rostered, which anytime Justin Fields is that low, you should definitely get on it because he has that 100-yard rushing upside. And then I think the only other guy, I mean, look, he hasn't done it, but I don't know what to do with Kyler Murray. Like, the matchup's good against Philadelphia. They should be throwing the ball for the entire game, but he just hasn't had that GPP. And I know he's dealing with an illness right now, so maybe he won't play, but like, he hasn't run for more than 50 yards this year. So that would be the concern. Could he do it this week and he's like 1% rostered? Sure. But it's asking for a lot, even against a very bad Eagles secondary.
Yeah.
But I'm probably going cheap. I'm probably going Tyrod Taylor. If you wanted to throw like Jarrett Stidham in there, we've seen Stidham, what was it, last year with the Raiders where he had 350 yards against, I think he had 350 against the 49ers maybe? I can't remember, but it was a big game.
Last year against the Chiefs, like around this time last year, he had a game against the Chiefs that he looked somewhat decent in.
Yeah, I mean, at that price, and I'm trying to look up the game that I'm talking about. It might have been that Chiefs game, but at that, at 365-3 against the 49ers, he was 219-1 against the Chiefs. And he ran for 34 yards and he ran for 50 yards. So
yeah,
he can run, he can throw. I mean, he's a guy who at that price, maybe he's going underlooked because he's white. And I'm being like on. I'm not trying to say anything about white quarterbacks. It's just people aren't going to think he can run for 50 yards.
Yeah. He is more mobile than people do realize, and he did do that last year. Jacoby Brissett at 4,900 is the other one that kind of sitting there. That if you wanted to play the 49ers pieces, we just talked about Terry McLaurin and kind of that connection with Brissett to step into really kind of the 49ers going big in that game, riding Christian McCaffrey, and then Brissett kind of on the coming back and chasing all game long. I think there's potential there for given what we've seen from Brissett, but at the same time, I do concern that the 49ers are going to snowball them, like kind of something to prove, get healthy type game. But we'll see on that one. That's kind of the only other one that I've got tracking on my radar. I think you did a great job running through all the other options. We can move over to running backs now. And who are you looking at running backs?
Yeah, running backs is tough this week. The first question you have to answer is whether or not you're playing Christian McCaffrey, because that'll build you the rest of your lineup essentially for you. It's like, hey, 9,600 is coming right off the top. He's going to be 20% rostered. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is looking like he's going to be close to 35 to 40. I think Kyren Williams is a good pivot off of McCaffrey if you didn't want to play him. Right now, he's trending to be about 6% rostered at 8,300 against the Giants, who the Giants, like, they've been not great anywhere. I mean, they just lack talent all over the board. They're allowing, the third most rushing yards to opposing running backs this season. So Williams definitely is in a spot where he could top 100 yards. If he does have multiple touchdown upside, he's getting the red zone volume to get there. It's just he hasn't done it yet. And a lot of people like to say, hey, I'm going to take the guy who's done it. And it's why I talk about point chasing almost every week. Yeah, McCaffrey has huge upside, but based on the number of red zone touches that Kyren is getting, or red zone opportunities he's getting, he theoretically should have big upside. He's getting the touchdowns, but he's just not, doesn't have that multiple touchdown game yet. Looking through the rest of the list, I think James Cook is interesting against New England. Could it just be like a run heavy game? No one is going to be playing him for the most part. Travis Etienne, just because he's facing Carolina and he's going to be less than 5% rostered. And I've talked about this Carolina defense all year. Justice Hill, 4,700. Outcarried Gus Edwards last week. At 4,700, he doesn't need to do a lot. He's going to be 2% rostered. What happens if Gus Edwards gets hurt? Is there at 2%? What's the running back likelihood that a running back gets hurt? Like 10% in a game. So if he gets hurt, I mean, Justice Hill could have a big game. I don't love chasing injuries, but I think that at that low of price, and he had 10 carries last week, so he's certainly in the ballpark. And then DeAndre Swift is the last name I'll throw out there. I think that going up against Arizona, we saw the Bears run all over Arizona. I think, who was it? Khalil Herbert and Justin Fields both had, I think, combined 250 yards or something. So those two or DeAndre Swift doesn't really catch passes, which is less than ideal, but has multiple touchdown upside and has over 100-yard upside against Arizona.
We've seen Miami use a little bit of a three-headed backfield of late with Jeff Wilson being involved. But Raheem Mostert got injured last week, and they are kind of chasing the playoffs right now. I wonder if Devon Chain, at 6,700, if this is a good spot in what should be one of the highest scoring games of the week. If a Chain going against that Ravens defense, he has that game-breaking ability to give you like essentially the running back George Pickens and score multiple long touchdowns to give you that upside at 6,700. The volume is going to be a little bit iffy. You're making that bet on those big performances, but again, this is a GPP setting, and I don't know how much rostership you expect he's going to come in with, but I think that's kind of one hanging out there a little bit. James Conner at 5,900 has a terrible matchup against Philadelphia, but he has been running back, top 5 running back over the last 3 weeks. And I think that that's an opportunity where gets involvement in the passing game, catches some dump off passes, maybe gets in the end zone in a situation where Arizona's chasing against Philadelphia. Low key at 5,900, I think that that could be a quiet play that would go under owned that has the potential to, again, the last 3 weeks, he's been doing pretty solid. And he had a great game against the 49ers a couple weeks ago. We can hit wide receivers now. And how are you structuring your wide receiver lineups?
Yeah, I think it's going back to trying to find narratives and fading narratives. Like, narratives are fun, and they are, um, there's something that people latch onto, even though they don't necessarily have data behind it, or just biases in general. And I look at Nico Collins, and I think a lot of people are going to underlook him simply because Noah Brown had a big game. What was it, 2 weeks ago against this defense, this Tennessee defense? But Nico Collins didn't play, and Nico Collins has as much upside as anyone in the NFL, and he's shown it. He's had multiple 100-yard games. His floor is horrendous, but um, he was largely shut down last week against Cleveland, but against Tennessee, he should have a big game. Chris Olave is another guy going up against Tampa Bay. I think you've talked about that being a game that we do want to stack just because it could be back and forth with both defenses struggling a little bit. What do we do with DJ Moore? Is it just like a complete fake?
How hurt is it? Like I don't know. I missed the game. I wasn't able to see the game last week because of Christmas festivities. But he got folded up and he went out of the game. Did he come back in the game later, or was he done for the day?
No, he played 74% of the snaps. So,
okay.
Theoretically, I didn't watch the entire game either, but
he just didn't score any points.
No, he just had 2 catches for 12 yards, and they were just running the ball the entire time. So, they basically ran every single play. They ran for 260. They didn't need to throw the ball. This week against Atlanta, the Falcons defense is a little bit better since they've benched Jeff Okudah. They're getting back to some of that early Falcons goodness that we saw. It depends on where their roster percentage is. I mean, Moore has upside, but right now he's trending at about 10%. I think if he goes higher than that, I'm probably out. But as things consolidate for the week, if he does fall below that, I would certainly be interested.
Tough matchup. That Atlanta's been pretty strong against wide receivers, and I think both teams would be perfectly fine running the ball over and over again, shortening that game, so to say, and kind of just trying to like have a rock fight that way.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I think just in terms of upside, though, he does have big playability.
Yes.
Tyreek Hill going up against Baltimore. Baltimore looked awesome last week. Tyreek Hill's matchup proof. And a pretty good pivot off of Christian McCaffrey. I mean, realistically, you could go Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Tyrod Taylor, who is the cheap running back that you mentioned earlier on the show?
If Charbonnet, if Walker scratches.
Yeah, if Walker scratches, you could throw Charbonnet in there and then throw Tyreek Hill in there, and you still have a lot of money for the rest of your lineup. So even if Charbonnet isn't the guy, I do think Taylor, Edwards-Helaire, and Hill is certainly a viable option. Quentin Johnson is a cheap guy. I can't get there, but I know people are. You're more of the dynasty guy than I am, but do you have and I guess you watched the Bills game last week. Is there anything here we should even consider?
Well, it looks like Josh Palmer and Keenan Allen are both going to be out. I mean, the Chargers don't have anything to lose. So at some point, you would think, like, why don't you give your first round draft pick some heavy volume? But at the same time, you're going to have an entirely new coaching staff and how invested. I mean, the GM is gone as well. So nobody involved in that pick is running that team anymore. So it's kind of one of those things that if you're not going to lean into it extra hard just because for the next guy to do it. That said, he's shown glimpses. He hasn't. I don't know. I mean, statistically and target volume and all those types of things that point to him being a bust are definitely there. But when you watch the game, his physicality shows up. He looks like an NFL receiver for sure. And so that's the one area that I think its potential is there. I do think I'm really curious how Denver is going to come out here, whether how much that locker room was behind Russell Wilson or if it was the type of thing that has just kind of rubbed everybody wrong and they're ready to go and get away from that. But I think there's potential here. I think Denver really just suffocates the Chargers, and that makes me nervous stepping there too much outside of a safety net play like Joe Everett, like you pointed out earlier.
So you're saying Russell Wilson is Bo Callahan?
I don't know who came to his birthday party. I'm just saying.
I mean, he does have an off. I mean, they both went to Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Russell Wilson has an office that's just like his own that like he sits in and just stays away from the team. Draft day reference for those that don't understand it. Although Kyle McCord might be Bo Callahan.
Yeah, I think there's
leaving
quarters.
leaving the Syracuse game on the sidelines before the game was over when your team's down like 50 is a bad look. Really bad look. But okay, so other guys, and I know we're getting off topic because it's week 17. I know you mentioned Cooper or Puka Nakua, kind of like Cooper Cup a little bit, 8,100. I think he's in like this weird pricing where not a lot of people are going to want to go there. And then the last guy I'll say is T. Higgins, even especially if Jamar Chase plays. How healthy is Jamar Chase going to be? We've seen Jamar Chase like leave games early. Could he be a decoy? We've seen that T. Higgins is a guy that Jake Browning likes to throw to. At 65, I mean, realistically, all Higgins needs is one long catch. So he'll get peppered throughout the game, but if he gets one long catch, he'll be over 100 yards. He'll probably have 6 or 7 catches. I think it's at least interesting. And then Brandon Ayuk, I've already talked about. I mean, just play whoever you want in San Francisco because I expect this to be quite a rout.
Some all over the board here. AJ Brown at 8,600. I mean, the Eagles have been leaning into the run game the last couple of weeks. At some point, they have to get the passing attack comfortable moving into the playoffs, and Arizona does feel like a get right spot there. 8,600. I mean, he's got the type of ceiling that can, just like Cooper last week, can turn slates, and so that was one that's kind of standing out to me. I don't know where his rostership would be projected to come in, but the ceiling is there. Going the complete opposite end, Marvin Mims as a dart throw at 3,500 to kind of make some lineups work. That's a guy that he had a couple big plays last week against the Patriots, had one of his better games of the year. If Cortland Sutton is out and they're kind of starting to look a little bit towards involving younger players or different players that aren't going to be there, that's a guy that I think has the potential to be able to give you a week. And DJ Chark at 3,600 going up against Jacksonville narratively in a revenge game. He had 2 touchdowns last week. He got a little bit more involvement than he had seen all year. Bryce Young looked a little bit more comfortable last week than he had looked all year. He's the type of after the catch player that Adam Thielen is not, and really Jonathan Mingo is not. And so at 3,600, I think there's certainly against the Jaguars defense that has been exploited before, a ceiling there for DJ Chark that could be an interesting play. We can do tight ends. Oh, go ahead, man.
No, we'll talk about it after tight ends. I'm making a change to my cash game lineup. Quarterback. Tight ends. I know we talked about it. It's a drug I can't quit. 7K. Travis Kelce. Um, he's coming in like the last several weeks. It's such a sucker's move, but he's coming in at like 3 or 4% every week, and nobody wants to play him. But if I think about Kelsey, it's a game I want to stack. It's a game I want to have some exposure to. And Cincinnati is allowing the second most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. Only Denver is allowing more. So, like, Pat Fryermuth had 120 yards against this defense. George Kittle had 150 yards against this defense. Their safeties are horrendous because they got rid of Jesse Bates in the offseason, and they're rocking with, I forget the guy's name, but it's a guy out of a school that I don't talk about.
Dax Hill.
Yeah, Dax Hill, who's been horrendous, and then Cam Taylor-Britt is back, which actually should help Kelsey because Cam Taylor-Britt was a second-year player. He's missed the last couple games at corner and should be a guy who helps his defense quite a bit. DJ Turner, also out of that school that I don't talk about, has been horrendous as well at corner. So not having to play DJ Turner is a good thing for Cincinnati, but it's a bad thing because more things are going to come to the tight end. So I do like Travis Kelsey a little bit. I just did downgrade him a little bit if Taylor Swift's at the game, so keep an eye on that. For whatever reason, it's not working.
It's almost like those DBs that you mentioned. Now that they don't know what's coming, it's a lot more difficult to play defensive back if you don't know what's coming your direction. Just saying.
Well, look, I don't know. I gotcha. Took me a second. I'm a bit slow today. I was gonna make a Taylor Swift and Travis Kelsey drinking before the night before the game reference. And not sleeping in the team hotel and being a bit of a diva. But that's for a different show and a different off-season conspiracy type podcast. George Kittle, 5,600, target everybody against the Commanders. Looking down at tight end a little bit, I think Chigakonkwo at 36 is fine against Houston if you wanted to go that low. And then a guy that's just not getting much love, but if we do think that the Atlanta secondary is good, which they are, could we see a Cole Kmet game? I know that he's facing Jesse Bates, ironically, but he has upside. His floor is bad, but he does have upside every time he touches the field. But he's a guy that I would just throw in there. I mean, for me, it's Kelsey, Kittle, likely Gerald Everett, like we talked about. If you wanted to go Evan Ingram, I think the matchup's difficult, so his upside might be a little bit challenging, but he's fine as well. But those are the main guys, and if you wanted to play Chigakonkwo, that's fine too.
Dalton Schultz at 4,300 with CJ Stroud back in the lineup, an exploitable Tennessee passing attack. That's one that I've got on my radar. The other one, Hunter Henry, if he plays at 4,000. We talked about Gerald Everett against the Bills last week. Bailey Zappi has been very comfortable going to Hunter Henry, so that could be a play as well. And especially if the Bills do what they're supposed to do, then they will score some points, and the Patriots will have to score some to come back there. But they didn't do what they were supposed to do last week against the Chargers, and that led to a more stressful night than what I was expecting the night before Christmas festivities. But it is what it is, and we're going to move on to our favorite stacks of the week. And who are you stacking up as your favorite play of the week?
I don't know if it's favorite, but it's there. I'm going to give two just because it's week 17 and the show's been enough of a mess. Under the radar that no one's going to play, Jarrett Stidham, Jerry Jeudy. Devontae Adams had 40% of Jarrett Stidham's receiving yards in the two games that we talked about against Kansas City and San Francisco. And tells me he likes to lock on to certain guys. And a lot of backup quarterbacks do that. Judy seems like more of the guy who's going to be locked on than Cortland Sutton, who's basically just like run a 9 route and let's throw it up and hope for the best. But Judy is certainly a guy that under the radar, no one's going to play 5,100 with Stidham. I think is a guy who is at least intriguing. Now let's go for like good stacks. And I think my favorite this week in GPP is Patrick Mahomes and Rashee Rice. 7,500 and 6,900. So I talked about if you wanted to add Travis Kelce, I think that's fine. If you wanted to bring back T. Higgins, I think that's fine. But I don't know. I just have this weird feeling that this game is going to be a lot more high scoring than what we anticipate. And a lot of the ownership is going to be around the New Orleans game. It's going to be around some pieces of the Philly game, and then a lot of roster percentage is going to be bundled around San Francisco.
My favorite stack of the week is Derek Carr and Chris Olave going up against the Buccaneers defense that's been very exploitable through the air. Olave looked like Olave last week, had a big performance against the Rams. I think this is a great spot. This is the Saints are really playing for their lives this week they have to beat the Buccaneers to stay in the hunt for the NFC South. So I like that matchup quite a bit. We talk about the volatility around Derek Carr. I do expect one of the higher games. He's had 3 touchdowns each of the last 2 weeks, 2 touchdowns the week before that, went over 300 yards last week. So he does have some spike performances in his profile. I don't know that they're going to be able to run the ball. They've struggled to run the ball in general, and the Buccaneers' run defense has been very good. So I think that they're coming in with a plan of attack to attack through the air and give me Derek Carr and Chris Olave. We can move to our discount plays of the week now. You got something? What's going on?
I got a little present for everybody. I haven't said this person's name in probably Austin Lee was still here, so that would have been at least 2 years ago. And it comes with a song. So it's time to do the DJ chart, DJ chart, DJ chart. Carolina going up against Jacksonville. Jacksonville's pass defense has been horrendous. DJ Chark. I mean, Bryce Young looked more than competent last week, throwing for 300 yards in a favorable matchup, but it's another favorable matchup for Carolina. DJ Chark had 98 yards and 2 touchdowns against the Packers last week, and it's fun. And we haven't done it in a long time, and who knows when we're going to be able to do DJ Chark again. So that's all I have. What do you got?
You took it right out of my mouth there.
DJ Chark.
Great call. I fed it up to you in the GPP plays, and you grabbed it, and that is my bet was mine. Cedric Wilson at 3,600, I think is going to be with Jalen Waddle out of the lineup. Again, kind of touching against that Baltimore-Miami game. Tua certainly struggled the last couple of weeks and not showing the explosive ceiling that we saw early in the year, and we know what Baltimore's defense is capable of doing. But at 3,600, I like that price as well. And so I'm going to go with him for my selection of the discount play of the week. Devin led off the show asking for some likes, and I'm going to double down on there. Get us to 100 likes. We've really enjoyed doing the show with Devin this year and with Phil. We don't want Phil to have missed his last show. So get us to 100 likes so we can do a playoff show for you and set some lineups going into the playoffs. But I'm going to hand it over now. Devin, why don't you tell the people what they need to know and to have a winning week and whatever else you want to give them before we go our last show of this 2023 year.
Yeah, I just can't wait to be canceled for saying Jarrett Stidham is white. So if that happens, I've had a really good run. But look, I just want to appreciate. I mean, Jeff, you did an awesome job stepping in, and we've had a lot of turnover on the show. All good turnover. So everyone, Ryan stepped in for a show. So thank you to him. Thanks to Dan Hendry for stopping in for a show. John Lee, unfortunately, just, him and I think talk almost every week, but wasn't able to make it because of schedule. And I know how much you guys wanted him to come in. So maybe he'll be if you give that 100 likes, maybe we'll get John Lee in here in 1 week. But thank you to all the listeners. Thank you to everybody. We'll be back next year if this is our last show. If not, I hope everyone hits that like so I can be back and have one more show and I can talk about DJ Chark again because it's fun, and that's ultimately what it's been. A great year. Both profitability wise, I think we've had some great calls on this show, but also just it's been really fun, and Jeff has been driving that, and Phil has been great as well, even though I disagree with 97% of his picks. But we're out, and have a great 2024. Happy New Year, everybody.